Hmm. Uh, huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going to be talking about the Dyatlov Pass Incident. But before we get into that, a couple of plugs. You can find us in our blog access on CryptidClues.ca. That is our main website. You can also find us on our social media channels as well, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Additionally, we're also on Patreon, where you can get ad-free, early, exclusive episodes. Again, we just want to say a huge thank you to all you listeners out there that have been supporting the show. We are trying to get more and more little perks and incentives on the Patreon and just pump out more content in general, just so everyone can benefit, no matter what platform you're listening onto. And if you have any questions or you just want to say hi, you can send us an email at cryptidclues@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into this. So the Dyatlov Pass, if you haven't heard of this is something that has kind of popped onto my radar every so often. And lately, I've noticed this specific image that has reoccurringly popped on my feeds. And I thought, let's just talk about this. Let's get into it. So a little bit of context, though, for people that are unfamiliar with this. The Dyatlov Pass incident was an unfortunate occurrence where 9 Soviet trekkers died in the northern Ural Mountains between February 1st and February 2nd in 1959. The significant aspect to this is their deaths are a cause of uncertain circumstances. So even to this day, this case has been pulled out of the archives many times, and they're still trying to figure out what really happened. So the Ural Mountains are basically a mountain range that runs approximately from northern Russia all the way to its south. And they are one of the richest mineral regions in the world, containing over 1,000 different types of valuable minerals. With an age of roughly 25 to 300 million years, the elevation of these mountains are unusually higher than the norm, but they had formed during the Uralian orogeny, I hope I'm saying that correctly, which is basically a linear deformation and mountaining building event that occurred during the last continental collisions in the Triassic and early Jurassic times. So this formation was the collision of the eastern edge of the upper continent Laurasia with the smaller continent of Kazakhstania. This collision lasted about 90 million years. So the climate of the Urals is continental, with its mountain ridges from north to south effectively absorbing a lot of sunlight, which helps increase the temperatures. And the western parts of the Ural Mountains usually are about 1 or 2 degrees warmer in the winter than the eastern parts, due to the Atlantic winds that kind of shoot in onto the west side and it warms it up, as opposed to more of a Siberian airflow that comes in and chills it that hits from the east. So average temperatures in January can be around negative 20 degrees Celsius, and throughout July they can get again up to plus 20 degrees Celsius. So western areas again see much more rainfall and is more dominated by thicker forest, and the Ural forests as well are quite diverse, especially in the southern parts. So going from left to right, basically you're dealing with such a dynamic and rich ecosystem. The type of wildlife encountered up here consists of elk, brown bear, fox, wolves, wolverines, lynx, squirrels, reindeer, badgers, black polecats. Like it's I dare say some of this terrain could fool someone into thinking it's landscape of North America. And if not by the scenery, it's wildlife even. I've looked at a bunch of photographs of this area and I thought, oh my gosh, is this British Columbia or is this Oregon? This is incredible. It has such a similarity to it. It's fascinating for being, again, on another continent, different part of the world. There are 9 strict nature reserves in the Urals, the first one being formed in 1920. Now, Russia views the Urals as an incredibly valuable mineral resource. Like I mentioned before, there are thousands of different types of deposits. So it makes sense why they would choose to preserve specific areas. But if you ask me, I am always one to advocate for a more secret, hidden reason as to why governments help keep national parks in specific areas and maintain them the way they do. But I digress. Let's get into this expedition and its members. So we have 10 initial members of this expedition, and their details are as follows. We have Igor, and again, I apologize. I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. Igor Alexeyevich Dyatlov. He's male, age 23. And I'm just going to say now, again, this will probably be one of the more graphic episodes that I do, just kind of talking about some of this information. So again, I'm going to put an explicit notification on the episode. But if you were younger, this might steer away, or if you have kids listening, maybe steer them away. But without further ado, let's get into this. So Igor, who's male, age 23, died of hypothermia. Yuri Nikolaevich Doroshenko, male, age 21, hypothermia as well. Lyudmila Alexandrovna Dubinina, female, age 20, internal bleeding from severe chest trauma. Georgy Alexeyevich Krivonishenko, male, age 23, died of hypothermia. Alexander Sergeyevich Kolvatov, male, 24, died of hypothermia. Zenada Alexeyevna Kolmogorova, female, 22, died of hypothermia. Rustem Vladimirovich Slobodin, male, 23, hypothermia as well. Nikolai Vladimirovich Thibault Brignol, male, 23, fatal skull injury. Semyon Alexeyevich Zolotarovo, male, 38, severe chest trauma. There was one last expedition member named Yuri Yefimovich Yudin, but he left the expedition in January prior to the incident due to illness, and he passed away in April of 2013. So the Kholat Sayak, which is the area that they were basically found in, this means dead mountain or silent peak. And this is a northern part of Ural. And the backing of this mountain name was reference to lack of game. I interpret that and imagine is for no animals really roaming around at all, which in my own humble opinion could simply be due to a lack of proper natural resources to thrive on, or a notable area to avoid due to predatory reasons. But I digress. This is where the expedition set up camp. And overnight, something caused them to cut their way out of their tent, flee their campsite, all the while being poorly dressed and caught in sub-zero temperatures and snowfall. Now, this inquiry into what really happened has faced disputes, arguments, counterclaims, and all that mumbo-jumbo, making it really difficult to discover the absolute truth because there is a good chunk of credit to add to each side making a case of its own. A common thought is that a snowstorm hit, like a slab avalanche, I believe is the term, causing ice chunks and all this debris to hit this unsuspecting team while they were in their tent, forcing them out of their tent, ill-prepared, and into the cold. Unable to see ahead, the hikers would have frozen in the storm as they tried to make it back to their base camp but got lost. This again didn't put this case to bed for many people and researchers because critics of this theory claim that there were several flaws. The flaws are lack of physical traces of an avalanche found by the rescuers, the more than 9-hour gap between the hikers building their camp, which is a process that required cutting into the mountain to form a barrier against the wind, and their quick departure, the shallow slope of the campsite, and the traumatic injuries the group members sustained. So cutting into the mountain, you could look up imagery of this as well. It's almost like if you have, let's say, a banister rail going down the stairs. Or actually, better example, let's say you have a step, a simple step to a staircase, and all the other steps are just a smooth, flat surface. So it's kind of like a slide, but then there's one step like you would see in a staircase cut into the middle of it. So when you're dealing with this scenario, to help protect, I believe, against the winds and any serious significant events from occurring, you would cut into the slope. So where you'd have the smooth slide going down, the crew cuts in and sets their tent up against the slab, thus protecting from any wind or anything significant. So that's what the team did here. And one of the rumors, I believe, from some researchers was that if they didn't cut in, then things would have been fine. But again, this is just another one of those disputes that's kind of brought up with this to counterclaim it. So before I go a little bit further ahead, I'm just going to jump to a quick ad break and we'll be right back. And we're back. So again, there's a 9-hour gap between the hikers building their camp. We have the shallow slope of the campsite here, the traumatic injuries that the group members sustained, all factors into the fact that, does this really add up to being an avalanche? Or can we dispute this a little bit more? Asphyxiation is a common cause of death for avalanche victims. And again, that's a form of suffocation. So in this case, some expedition members reportedly, and again, this is graphic warming, had tongues removed, eyeballs removed, fractured skulls, broken ribs, and gashes to their heads, to which some doctors equate to the effect of a car crash. Now again, many simulations have actually been performed to recreate the events of that night in the case of an avalanche, and there is merit to it. If heavy blocks of snow landed on these hikers, they would have experienced bone crushing and other injuries not typically associated with avalanches. But let's not dismiss why several individuals would have ran out into the cold without proper clothes on. I reckon shock is a major factor in this moment. And while I can't personally speak from this kind of experience, you would be experiencing probably you'd be shocked. You'd be experiencing, I don't know if like illusion would be the word, but you would just be panic stricken. You wouldn't be making proper judgment calls and clarity, because many of these people, while they were experienced, and Dyatlov was an experienced skier and trekker in the snow, some of these individuals were from, I believe, just post-secondary schools. And this is just the harsh reality of nature coming in full force on you. So you can't always make those judgment calls, especially if your tent is crushed under some snow and you can't get back in there. I mean, then you're trapped. But you would have to realize, though, it's suicide to go out into the cold without the proper apparel, wouldn't you? And I'm not questioning the methods of these individuals, because again, I don't know the circumstances. I was not there, and I have the deepest sympathies for what these individuals went through, because it just ended so ill-fated for them. But this is where people speculate that something might have maybe made them afraid, either the natural conditions or something more sinister and alive. Some more details to sum up on this inquiry so far. 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 others of fatal injuries. There were no indicators of other people nearby. The tent had been ripped open from the inside. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. Traces from the camp showed that all the group members left the campsite on their own terms by foot. Oddly enough, there were some levels of radiation found on one of the victims' clothing. The fatal injuries of the 3 bodies were dismissed as being human caused due to the force of the blows being too strong, so there wasn't any significant tissue damage, I believe. There was no additional information released about the team's internal organs, and again, there were no survivors. Now, in 1997, it was found that negatives from Krivonischenko's camera were kept in a private archive of one of the investigators by the name of Lev Ivanov. The film was donated to the Dyatlov Foundation, and the hiker's diaries all fell into public domain in 2009. And the photographs can all be seen online. So again, this is all accessible. It's worth noting some imagery is very, very graphic. With one image in particular, though, this is where it gets interesting, and this is the image I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. Now, it's anyone's guess as to what is really seen in this photo. It could be completely fake, or it could be real. It goes hand in hand with this thing I like to say where 99%, 99.99999% of all of this occurrences could all be fake. It'll all be staged in a hoax. But there's still that 0.00001% chance that one of these things is real. And maybe this is an example of that, but I cannot confirm that. So it's up to you to just apply your own interpretation, I would say. So there is either someone pretending to be this tall, hairy figure, or it is actually a tall, hairy figure. This photo is available to see online, and I definitely encourage you to go and check it out because I'm curious what you guys might think it is. This is one of the photos that was taken. Again, you can see the team all together and there's some funny moments and stuff. It looks like it was definitely a good time, and it is quite sad how this kind of unfolded. But this one image, at what point it was taken in this expedition, I can't confirm, but it's definitely of something. And I wouldn't put it past a bunch of college, university students just to kind of be kidding around, having a good time, and one of them just pretending to goof off and be the Yeti that people have been talking about at this time. But there's always that chance that it might not be, and it could be a legitimate photo. But in conclusion, Russian authorities have reopened the investigation into the Dyatlov incident a few times. And I think the most recent time was back in 2019. Again, this is only to discount the possibility of any crimes being committed. While the main three causes explanations are still as follows: slab avalanche, an avalanche, or a hurricane. And so a few final facts of contradictory evidence here that I pulled. The location of the incident did not have any obvious signs of an avalanche having taken place. An avalanche would have left certain patterns and debris spread over the area, basically. And the bodies found within the same month of this event were covered with a very shallow layer of snow. And there had been an avalanche, had there been an avalanche of the significant and sufficient strength to sweep away these bodies would have been all gone. Like it just would have wiped it all out and cleansed the area, you could say. This would have caused more serious and different injuries as well in the process, and would have damaged the tree line. So you're not only looking at the damage done to the bodies, you're looking at the natural damage as well. You got to take in all these different accounts. So with over 100 expeditions to this region that have taken place since this incident, none of them have actually reported conditions that might create such an avalanche. A study of the area using terrain-related physics and technology basically revealed that this location was entirely unlikely for such an avalanche like this to actually occur. The dangerous conditions found in other nearby areas, which had significantly steeper slopes, were found to be in April and May when the snowfalls of winter were melting. But during February, when this incident occurred, there were no such conditions. Again, an analysis of the terrain and the slope showed that even if there could have been a very specific avalanche to this area that somehow had occurred, its path would have gone past the tent. The tent had collapsed from the side, but not in a horizontal direction. Now, Dyatlov, as I mentioned prior, was an experienced skier, and the much older Zolotarov, who was studying for his master's certificate in ski instruction and mountain hiking. Neither of these two men would have been likely to camp anywhere in the path of a potential avalanche. We're dealing with two professionals here that can identify and can see, or at least foreshadow, what could come. So if they've taken the right steps to prevent something like this from happening by pitching their tent in a safe area, why would they risk their lives and the lives of their friends and compatriots? Why would they also leave their tent again without the proper apparel? There are certain things not stacking up here. Footprint patterns leading away from the tent, again, were inconsistent with someone, let alone a group of 9 people, running in panic from either a real or imagined danger. All the footprints leading away from the tent and towards the woods were consistent with individuals who were walking at a normal pace. So that is very questionable in itself. All in all, we're dealing with several different perspectives that are clashing together to try and figure out the real truth of what happened. And all we can really do is look at, like scientists and researchers have been doing, recreating the scene and analyzing the trajectory and the path and the damage that would have been done had an avalanche occurred. Now, it's anyone's guess again, because you're dealing with professionals that would have understood the dangers and would have taken the necessary precautions. And at the end of the day, it's unfortunate that these individuals lost their lives. I'm just really wondering why and what would have happened the injuries that some of these people sustained being so uncharacteristically associated with being avalanche injuries. Some bodies ending up in close proximity in water, and it just doesn't make sense. And it has me baffled. Again, I've heard many people claim that it's just the result of them being panic stricken, an avalanche and all that, but there is a lot more, I would say, unexplained circumstances attributed with this. This is something I'm going to get into with Reuben again. I say that with every topic because I always do. I like talking to Reuben and bouncing these different theories and ideas back with him. But I'm glad that I was finally able to kind of dive into this research and talk and speak to it, because this is something that's been on the back of my mind for a long time, ever since I heard it and ever since I started seeing these photos of this incident appear on my feeds. So this has been a very, very interesting topic of discussion, and I hope many of you listening will continue the research and keep exploring it. Let me know what you think really happened in the comments below. I'd be curious to know if you suspect it was just straight slab avalanche, hurricane, or if you do believe that there was something more sinister and cryptid related. Me being of the mind that I am, tend to attribute this to something maybe being cryptid, Bigfoot, Sasquatch related. You never know. Again, you have something that is living in a remote area, not much wildlife out there in this specific part of this mountain range, so this thing could be roaming around, going in and out, and yeah, it's just one of those things that we'll just have to keep inquiring and investigating. But that is all for this week's episode. So again, let me know what you think happened, or send us an email at CryptidClues@gmail.com. Again, you can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca, and you can access our social media channels on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and Patreon, where you get ad-free exclusive early episodes. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay safe, take care,